Hi, my dear friend. Welcome to the Heart Space. Here, we just talk. We bare our hearts. That thing that keeps us awake at 2 a.m. That thing that makes us bow our heads in shame, in regret, in guilt. That thing that makes us want to run away, that keeps us quiet when we have tons of words buried, struggling for attention. This space is that safe space where you can be yourself, talk about them, let them stop eating you up. This is where we share stories that emanate from the heart. We learn lessons, we don't judge, we allow people to be people, understanding that there, but for the grace of God, goes the rest of us. So today we're just going to share Sade's story. And Sade's story I came across in my years of counseling. I ran a cake shop, and more like it was a secret service kind of outfit, in the sense that people came to buy what I had to sell, but they got much more. It almost felt as if they could smell that I was Christian, and they were drawn to whatever I had to say. So I found myself many times just listening to people's stories. So people will come into my office. Actually, at some point, I had to carve out an office for just counseling and praying with people, just being that safe space for them. And I have written books on these matters because I have their permission to talk about it. I mean, their stories are not secret, and in time you get to meet some of them. So today we're talking about Sade and her life, her childhood trauma, and how it affected many others in her life. The shame was a physical weight. It felt like a shroud, heavy, suffocating, pressing down on my chest until my lungs burned for air I just couldn't find. The world had shrunk to this dusty, overgrown past, the buzz of insects, the frantic drumming of my own heart. I looked left. I looked right. No one. Just the endless green of the Nigerian bush. Silent and uncaring. I looked right. I looked left again. I still saw no one. Only the long shadow of my own unbearable secret stretching out behind me. Every part of my soul, every piece of my person screamed, "Don't do this. Sade, don't dare do this." But the fear was a roaring lion. My conscience was just a whisper. The fear was louder. It drowned everything else. The soft goose from the bundle in my arms. The memory of my mother's lullabies. The lessons from Sunday school. And a loving God. All of it was gone. Swallowed by a tidal wave of terror. The baby stared, a tiny, innocent life that had come from a moment of pure violence and hate. This child was not a blessing. She was a brand, a permanent public mark of my uncle's sin and my own defilement. In our village, there was no room for a story like this. There was no grace for a girl like me. A girl whose body was now proof of a crime no one would ever acknowledge. They would only see my swollen belly, my fatherless child, my shame. Hot, useless tears streamed down my face. I had to make it stop. The whispers, the pointing fingers, the condemnation in my own family's eyes. I had to make it all go away. This felt like the only way. This impossible, soul-crushing choice felt like the only path back to being invisible. My hands trembled as I knelt. The cool ground, a shock against my knees. I gently, so gently, placed a small cloth wrapped bundle beside a thicket of elephant grass, just far enough from the path to be hidden, just close enough. I prayed, I prayed, I prayed, I prayed for someone to find her. A good person, a family who would love her without seeing the shadow of my trauma standing right behind her. I let my hands linger for just a second on the warm cloth. A final treacherous cloth. I touched her. A choked sob tore from my throat, a sound so full of anguish it felt like it ripped something loose inside me. I stood up. I took one last look, searing the image into my memory forever. And I ran. Oh, I ran without looking back because I knew if I looked back, I would break into 1,000 pieces right there on that path. The sound of my own ragged breathing filled my eyes. I couldn't drown out the faint, fading cry I was leaving behind. How did I get here, you may want to ask? Before the shame, before the path, before the impossible choice, there was me, Shadi. A girl who loved the smell of rain on hot earth and the taste of sun-ripened mangoes. I was 15. And my world, though simple, was full of color. After my parents passed, I went to live with my aunt and uncle in a small village in Oyo State. My aunt was a stern woman. Her love measured out in rations of duty. But it was a stable home. My uncle, he was a different story. He was a man whose smiles never reached his eyes. His presence made the air in the room feel thick and heavy. My dreams were small, but they were mine. I wanted to finish school, become a teacher. I loved how words can build worlds and how numbers could create order out of chaos. I found God not in fairy sermons of our local pastor, but in the quiet geometry of a spider's web and a loyalty of the sun. The sun rose every morning without fail. My faith was simple but private. It was my quiet conversation with God, the God I pictured as a gentle, loving, and listening Father. That faith, that simple world was shattered on a Tuesday. My aunt was at the market in the next town and wouldn't be back until dark. I was home alone, washing clothes in the backyard, humming a tune from the radio. I didn't hear him approach. One moment I was alone, the next my uncle was standing right behind me. His usual unsettling smile was gone, replaced by a look of hunger that made my blood run cold. I tried to ask what he wanted, but the words would not come out. What happened next is a blur of nightmarish images. It wasn't a story with a beginning and an end. It was just chaos. It was violence. It was tearing of my dress, the force of his hands, the pain that ripped through not just my body but my soul. In our community, he was a respected elder. He was a man of God. He was also a monster. When it was all over, he just stood up, adjusted himself, and warned me that if I told a soul, he would tell everyone I threw myself at him, that I was a girl of loose morals. And he was right. No one would ever believe me over him. I lay there on a packed earth long after he had gone. The soapy water was cold and grey. I felt completely and utterly broken. He had planted his filth inside of me and called it my own. I know now there are studies on adolescent trauma in Nigeria about the stigma and social exclusion that follows. But you see, at that time, I didn't have words. I was just a living, breathing secret. 2 months later, the morning sickness started. My auntie noticed my changing body before I was willing to admit it to myself. Her eyes, already hard, grew flinty with suspicion. The questions began, first as hints, then as brutal accusations. Who's the man? She demanded, her voice laced with disgust. How could I answer? Telling the truth meant accusing her husband. Lying meant condemning myself. So I said nothing. My silence was my confession. She didn't see a victim. She saw an ungrateful niece who brought shame on her house. The day she threw me out, it was pouring rain. You're not my blood, she screamed, her words like stone as she threw my small bag into the mud. Go! You and that abomination you carry are no longer welcome here. I was 16 years old, pregnant and homeless. People talk about family rejection and social isolation as clinical terms. I lived them. The streets of Ibadan became my home. I slept in unfinished buildings. I begged for food, my growing belly hidden under layers of rags. Shame was no longer a feeling. It was my identity. People looked at me, or worse, at me. People looked through me. Or worse, they looked at me with such contempt. The mental torment was constant. Many nights I thought of ending it all. I've read since how high the rates of unsafe abortion attempts are among girls in that situation in Nigeria. In a moment of pure desperation, I became one of them. I found a back alley herbalist who sold me a foul-smelling concoction. I was violently ill for days, but the life inside me, a stubborn and unwanted miracle, held on gidigba, was going nowhere. The failed abortion felt like God's judgment. It felt like He was personally condemning me to live out my shame. The baby was my cross to bear. As the birth grew closer, blind panic set in. I couldn't go to a hospital. I had no money. I had no name. I had no one. I would be questioned. I would be judged. So I found a quiet, secluded spot and gave birth all alone. 16 years old. In the dirt, with only my terror to keep me company. The pain was a fire that consumed me, but when it was over and I held that tiny, crying baby in my arms, something shifted. Something shifted. For just a second, the shame receded and I saw not a symbol of my trauma, but a person, a perfect, beautiful little girl. And that was the most terrifying of all. Because I knew in that moment I couldn't be her mother. A mother is a protector, a provider. I was broken, I was homeless, and I was hated. My shame was a poison and I was terrified it would seep into her. I've since learned that abandoned children can struggle their entire lives with feelings of unworthiness. In my twisted and traumatized mind, I believed leaving her was the only way to save her from me. Was the first and only truly motherly thing I could do. I was giving her a chance at a life without my story attached to her. So I cleaned her, wrapped her in the only clean cloth I owned, and walked into that bush path. I whispered a frantic, broken prayer, not for me, but for her. If you're there, please let someone good find her. Please give her the life that I cannot give her. And then I left my heart on the side of the road and I ran. Time passed. The leaping time. New life. 15 years. It's long enough to bury a secret so deep you can almost convince yourself it never happened. Almost. The years right after were a blur. I was a ghost, but one night hiding from the rain in a small storefront church, something changed. The pastor was talking about grace. He spoke of God's love, not as a reward for the perfect, but as a rescue for the broken. For the first time in years, a crack appeared in the wall around my heart. That night, I whispered into the darkness, God, if you can still see me, help me. That prayer was the start of a long, slow journey back to life. A woman from the church, a kind widow named Mama Grace, took me in. She didn't ask about my past. She just gave me a place to sleep and a bowl of hot food. I started reading the Bible again, not as a book of rules, but as a love letter. I saw it was filled with stories of outcasts and sinners who were met with radical compassion. My story, I realized, wasn't a disqualification from God's love. It was a qualification for God's grace. The words that have been trapped inside me started to flow out. I began to share parts of my testimony, the homelessness, the despair. I never told the whole story. Of course, the secret was a giant hole I just built my new life around, plastering carefully over it with scripture and good works. And my reputation grew. They started calling me Evangelist Shadi. I had a gift for speaking. I traveled across Nigeria, then to Ghana, then to conferences in the UK and America. Thousands of people came to hear me preach about the very forgiveness I had not fully accepted for myself. I became a symbol of hope. Women will confess their own secret shames to me, and I will tell them, God's grace is bigger than your shame. God is bigger than your secret. His love will cover your sins. I believed God for them. I just couldn't believe it was big enough for me. My life was a paradox. On the outside, I was Evangelist Shadi, a powerful woman of God, but on the inside, I was still that girl running from a cry on a dusty path. The secret was a constant low-grade fever. Every year on the baby's birthday, I would lock myself in the room and the grief would be as fresh as it was 15 years ago. I was a tour guide to a land of freedom. I never fully entered myself. And then the turning point. God saw my anguish. He decided to intervene. The command came on a quiet Wednesday afternoon. It wasn't a booming voice from heaven. It was a quiet and far more terrifying. I was in my study preparing for a major women's conference in Lagos. The theme was fearless. The irony was suffocating. I was flipping through my Bible when my eyes landed on Luke 8:17. For nothing is hidden that will not be made manifest, nor is there anything secret that will not be known and come to light. I'd read that verse hundreds of times, but on this day, the words lifted off the page. It wasn't a general truth anymore. It was a personal command. Tell them, Shadi. The thought was so clear, I physically flinched. No. I whispered to the empty room. I started pacing, my heart pounding. The foundation of your ministry is a lie. Tell them everything. Panic shock through me. No, Lord. You can't be serious. I said out aloud, this would destroy everything. They won't see grace. They would only see filth. My ministry will be over. I argued with God. I listed every reason why this was a terrible, destructive idea. God, you are making a mistake. And God answered, what about her? My daughter. She'd be 15 now. What if the public confession destroyed her life too? How could a loving God ask for something so reckless? I thought. But there was no argument back from heaven. There was only that quiet, persistent command. It felt like God was calling me to finally receive for myself the very grace I'd been preaching about for years. He was asking me to become fearless for real. My surrender was not joyful. It was a moment of utter defeat. After hours of pacing and arguing, I fell to my knees. The thought of carrying that secret for one more day, of standing on that stage and preaching about being fearless while being the biggest coward in the room, was suddenly more terrifying than telling the truth. Tears streamed down my face. Okay, I whispered. Okay, God, I will do it. but I'm so afraid. If it is what you want, I will do it. Okay. In that moment of surrender, I felt a cold, stark reality. I was standing at the edge of a cliff and God just asked me to jump. And for the first time, I had finally agreed to let go. The days leading up to the conference were the longest of my life. Every morning I'd wake up in a cold sweat. My mind would be screaming, "You can still back out. No one knows. Don't ruin your life." It was a war between two fears. The fear of what people will think versus the fear of disobeying God. The God who rescued me. I knew that secrets have a way of poisoning everything from inside out. Mine had been undermining me for 15 years, and now it was threatening to destroy me, not through exposure, but through my refusal to let it go. Oh, I spent hours on my knees. I told God, but it was not my fault. My prayers were simple. They were desperate. Lord, I can't do this. You give me strength. I didn't even start this thing in the first place. I didn't ask my parents to die. All the things I could say, I said in God's ears. I told him I was afraid. I told him to be my courage. Slowly, the Bible became a source of comfort again. I clung to Psalm 34, verse 18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. He saves those who are crushed in spirit. I was broken. I was brokenhearted. I was crushed. That promise was for me. The transformation began there in the waiting. It was stripping away everything I relied on, my reputation, my image. God was showing me that Evangelist Shade was an idol that I had built. To obey him, I had to be willing to let her die. I had to be willing to stand before the world as just Shade, the broken, terrified girl from the bush path in the village. So I started to write not a sermon, but my story. For the first time, I wrote it all down. The assaults, the shame, the abandonment, the rejection. I wept as I wrote, lancing a wound that had been festering for 15 years. I had to finally name my sin without any spiritual gloss. I abandoned my child. It was a horrifying act, born out of trauma and fear, but it was my act. Yes, I was abused. Yes, I was raped. Yes, I was rejected, but I perpetuated it. I abandoned my own child. And yet, as I wrote, I began to see God's hands in it more clearly. It was there when Mama Grace took me in. It was there in that little church. My hypocrisy didn't negate his faithfulness. My sin didn't nullify his grace. Did I trust that his purpose in this was redemption, not destruction? The day before the conference, I called my 2 senior aides, and with trembling hands, I told them everything. I watched their faces, expecting shock, then disgust, and I saw the shock. But then I saw tears welling up in their eyes, not tears of judgment, but tears of compassion. When I finished, my aide, David, a stoic man, cleared his throat. "Shade," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "we have always admired your strength, but we have never admired your courage more than we do right now." The acceptance was my gift, a small taste of the grace I was so terrified the world would deny me. That night, I didn't sleep. I just prayed for God to hold my hand while I obeyed. I was no longer fighting. I was ready. The day of the conference, the auditorium was electric. 10,000 women singing in worship. Backstage, my heart hammered against my ribs. Every instinct screamed at me to run. Esther, my aide, placed a hand on my shoulder. "He's with you," she whispered. When my name was called, I walked out into the blinding light. I looked at the sea of eager, expectant faces, waiting to hear a message of fearlessness from their hero. I knew I had to shatter their illusion of me to introduce them to the reality of God. I leaned into the microphone. "Good evening," I began, my voice shaking but clear. "My name is Shade, and for 15 years I've been a liar." A stunned silence fell over the hall. I could feel the thousands of confused glares. I fixed my gaze on the cross at the back of the auditorium and I began to speak. The theme of this conference is fearless, but I've lived my life as a coward, ruled by a secret shame. You know me as Evangelist Shade, but tonight I need you to see the 16-year-old girl I once was. A girl who was broken, homeless, and pregnant after a violent assault. I told them everything. My voice broke when I described giving birth alone. And then I came to the part I dreaded most. In my fear and in my shame, I said, tears now flowing freely. I did the unthinkable. I walked through a quiet bush path. I looked left and I looked right, and I abandoned my newborn baby girl. A collective gasp went through the auditorium. A sound of pure shock. This was it, the moment of my undoing. I ran away from that baby and I'd been running ever since. I continued. I preached to you about forgiveness. I've told you to bring your secrets into the light. All the while, I was hiding the darker secrets of my life. The grace I offered you was a grace I never believed was big enough. I told them about God's command in my study, my fear, my surrender. I stand here tonight with nothing left to hide. My reputation is in ashes at my feet. You may call me a fraud, but I'm here to tell you the truth. The hero of my story is not me. It is the God who pushed a liar and a coward. The God who refused to let me preach freedom while I was in my own prison. I fell silent, completely spent. The silence was absolute. I braced myself for the condemnation. Then from the middle of the crowd, a single woman stood up, then another and another. Soon women all over the hall went on their feet, and then the sound began. Not judgment, but weeping. The sound of 10,000 broken hearts, confessing their own secrets in the safety of my brokenness. A woman near the front began to sing, Amazing Grace. How sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Soon, the entire hall was singing, their voices thick with tears. It wasn't a hymn anymore, it was an anthem. My ministry did not collapse, it was reborn. My greatest shame became my most powerful sermon. You would think the story would end there. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. It was from a pastor in a town near my old village. Dear Evangelist Shadit, read, I watched your confession online. 15 years ago, my wife and I were unable to have children. One morning, I heard a baby crying in the bush. I found a beautiful baby girl wrapped in a clean cloth. We named her Grace. She is now 15 years old, and she's the light of our lives. After watching your testimony, my wife and I believe we need to talk. My journey didn't end in that confession. It was, in so many ways, is where it really began. My story is proof that our deepest secrets, the things we're sure will disqualify us, can become the very platform for God's most profound work. True freedom is not found in hiding our brokenness, but in surrendering it. God didn't just ask me to confess my past. He invited me into a future where my greatest shame will become a bridge to the daughter I never thought I would see again. My dear friend, if this story of redemption, reconciliation has touched your heart, subscribe to this channel, share the story. I don't know what this evoked inside you. If you too, like Shade, have been battling shame, if you've been talking about, if you've been hiding living a lie through the years, I can tell you this, there's healing and freedom waiting for you. I want you to reach out to a trusted pastor, counselor or friend, or even come to me. Write me, talk to me, I'm here for you. Remember the words of the psalmist. It says that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. My dear, your story is not over yet. Actually, your story is just beginning. I know you feel shame. I know you regret. I know you're guilty. And I know it feels like a weight on your shoulders. But let me tell you something. God is the one who specializes in making good. It takes the rubbish and makes jewels out of them. If you doubt me, read the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the man we are all following. There is the greatest dysfunction family. And if Jesus, our Savior, can come from that kind of line, your story is the one the world is waiting for. Don't harbor any secret any longer. Say it. Take this sting out of it. Let it lose its grip on your life. Come out of that prison. You deserve freedom. Your voice needs to be heard. I know that that story makes you ashamed, but hear it. That platform you've always wanted, the message you'd always wanted to share, that's the message right there. The message of hope and reconciliation with Christ. Will you let it all go and let it all hang out? Yes, they can laugh at you, they can cheer, they can jeer and all of that. But listen, your freedom is more important than what they do to you. And believe me, like Jesus said, when that woman was caught in adultery, he said to them, he said, the one that is guiltless, let him first cast the first stone. Everybody has a secret. Bring it to the open. Take the life out of it. Now, if this has helped you, let me hear about it. Write in the comments, write me, tell me about it. Tell your pastor, tell your friend. You don't need to continue to live a life in bondage. For now, my dear friend, I want to say to you, I love you. I love you. You need to hear that again. I love you, but God loves you more. God bless you. See you in the next video. I'm waiting to hear from you actually before the next video. Talk to me. Bye-bye.